Hi, good evening, everybody. I must say, I guess I've learned something from Mr. Das because whenever you meet him, you have to part, crowd of ladies around him always. And I heard two, three ladies cheering for me, so I think things are looking up as the years go by. Good evening, sir. And welcome to this amazing celebration. Congratulations to you, Mr. Tumala, for this. Um, I know everyone's going to spend the evening sharing memories of what brought them into this wonderful organization. And there's so many of us here who are bound inextricably forever by the amazing learning that we've had here. We've learned so much coming together as a family. And I remember, the first time I was offered a job to start a school in Bangalore. And Mr. Das called me. And I remember, like Rohit, he was busy with his boarding school. I was busy at far less ambitious things. I was organizing dinner duty at the Doon School. And Mr. Das on the call says, what is bothering you about taking this on? So I said, I'm very young. So he said, just grow a beard, no one will be able to tell. And he later told me that's what he did when he took on the job at Mayo. But I think that, is the first thing that I do want to ask you is what gave you the courage to take risks on people, to convince young people to do bizarre things, to take those decisions, to hire the first lady teacher at the Doon School. What gave you that courage?
No, I'm not sure that I even knew I had courage. I had to do these things, so I did them. I wasn't really very bothered about reactions, and that was my problem. I was not sensitive enough to know so-and-so will react and so-and-so will not react. But unless you take a few risks in this job, you will never get on top of education. Education is a business where you need to constantly innovate, constantly look at what you could do better. And that was the reason why I took risks, so that I could ensure that we were doing better than before.
Yeah. In John Ray's biography, Delusions of Grandeur, of course, legendary headmaster of the Westminster School, he talks about how easy it is for leaders, and especially school leaders, to get carried away by the work that they do. They get carried away by the mission, they believe too much in the vision. And then, of course, the students you meet, their parents. Rohit mentioned one of the things that he's learned from you, and clearly by the previous response, humility is something really big on that list. What are some of the things that you think school leaders really need?
One of my thoughts has always been, I have lots and lots of dreams. And those dreams can only be dreams if you do it yourself, because you can't achieve them all. And so my life has been living dreams through my students. And what students have achieved, I have achieved. That's the way I look at it. And therefore, when I'm actually on the job, I'm living those dreams and then ensuring that my students live those dreams later and make me successful rather than themselves. That's the way I should look at it.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, that's amazing. NP, to you, you've titled the book, of course, The Man Who Saw Tomorrow. But why don't you tell us when you started thinking that Mr. Das is the man who saw tomorrow. What was that moment that made you think that this is really looking into the future?
It could be two ways. One is me and Raz at that time, where we were, compared to that where Shomie was. So for us, that is what looking into the future and seeing that future. That was the starting of feeling of the man who saw tomorrow. But Shomie was someone, it is not that he was living on his past glory. He was so much advanced in everything that he was doing. Last 2-3 years until, he knew more technology than we people who are day in and day out into it. The kind of gadgets he used to take out from his bag and the kind of things and what all could be done and what kind of things he was doing at school when there was no technology as such. In 1950s, using a computer, what does it mean and how it could put to use. All those things, actually, even today, he discusses with me on how generative AI can play a role in education, what are the challenges, and he is the most significant conversational buddy even today on these things at that core deep education level. That's what makes Shomie so special and truly the man who saw tomorrow.
Wow, thank you. NP, staying with you, you talked about living so many of and bringing to life so many of Mr. Das's ideas. Which do you think was the greatest challenge among those ideas? And how were you able to build that resolve to be able to make that come to life?
Of all the child-centered education, it took really long time for me to understand and try to operationalize. Always, Oak Ridge was a kind of lab. Truly, how do you achieve a child-centered education, which otherwise teacher-centric education? So that teacher-centeredness to child-centeredness was a process. I don't think we have achieved completely, but we were continuously working to make it happen. That's what even when I talk to my co-school team, that was mission incomplete that actually I'm trying to do now, that true child-centeredness is what we are trying to achieve through co-school. That's what the most difficult part of education.
Okay, great. Mr. Das, I think just building on what NP said, in our bid to be able to, and our honorable chief guest talked about the NEP, and it opens with the line to make, India this glorious place for education. But do you think that in our effort to excel, we have inculcated in our school systems, in our children, in ourselves, this excessive sense of competitiveness? We've become too critical of what they do. Has that taken away from the joy of learning, the lifelong learning that we've talked about? And what do you think schools can do to, recover that spirit?
I think that the problem really is that we are dictated to by universities. And our entire objective at the end is that our kids get into good universities. We splash it all over the place. We've got 2 kids here and 3 kids there and so on. But actually, that's not what education is about, getting kids into universities. So I always feel that you should try and dilute this constant pressure on kids for universities. They'll get in. If they're going to really want to get into a university, they will get in. You don't have to make it that serious. Take life more in your stride. I remember taking a physics class where what we did was I had made a little car, toy thing. And I made it follow a white line automatically. I went round and round. And then some boy said, that was what I wanted. Some boy said, but the battery will run out. Then what? It'll stop running. I said, well, before that, it should go and charge itself. And he said, but how? And that is what I wanted him to ask. But how? So you take away this constant thing of passing examinations. On the other hand, you make them ask questions which are relevant to their lives, which are relevant in themselves, and which inculcate curiosity. So that was the way I made children enjoy and love learning rather than passing exams and getting into universities.
Thank you. Thank you. NP, you talked about the right mentor at the right time. But I also think on some level, the openness to hearing new ideas, and of course the world has changed in the last 30 years since those first conversations. So where do some of us who are, playing the roles that, or will eventually play the roles that Shomie did, where do we find our Raj and NP who will, write books about us? How do we stay open to new ideas?
It happens. You don't need to look for it.
Hopefully somebody will come knocking at Rohit's and my door sometime. Yeah. But I think, crucially, going back to those initial days, I mean, we've heard the stories. It's now in the book. And there are going to be so many stories that will follow. But what do you think from those initial days? We've talked about child-centered education. We've talked about curriculums, the IB, and so on. But what do you think are significant changes that you have seen in the way education is perceived and understood in India from when those initial days of Oak Ridge were starting and today?
When we were designing Oak Ridge, we were only considering students will continue to study in Oak Ridge only up till 8th grade. After that, they move away to Chaitanyas and Narayanas of the country, because end of the day, everybody's goal is to get marks and ranks. And as a holistic school, it is very difficult to satisfy their need. But no matter, we will not change our course. We will continue to make it a holistic education only. We will never get to that path. I felt so happy when principals successfully came and told me that there is so much of demand for 11th grade and we are not able to admit, what do we do? That's what, when that situation came, I felt we arrived, because we never thought that could happen. So that itself is a big change. Parents have actually recognized what their children require. Yes, there is a world that looks for so many marks and ranks, and they make children only commit to that kind of education since childhood. But there is also a segment of parents who are appreciating a true holistic education. That is one big change. Second thing is the adoption of technology. While we aspire that schools should adopt so much of technology, but in last 20 plus years, the amount of technology adoption in schools is phenomenal. So without which this all what children today are able to learn could not have possible. And at this scale, see how many teachers are like Shomie. So that kind of experiential learning today students are able to have because adoption of technology. So like that, there are so many changes are happening, but what it is going to be is so transformative in next 5 years.
You know, our chief guest said that, you know, both you and Raj have played the roles of nation builders. What do you think that we in India are creators and, you know, blazing down pathways of education? Or do you think we're mostly on the receiving end of innovation that's happening in our field?
See, India with 140 crore population is a world by itself. What all happens in India, if it is to imitate what happens outside, it will not work for India. So much of the ground up innovation that is happening, that is so cost effective and relevant, it is just happening in India. So last April, I was in a conference in San Diego, addressing a gathering like this. All of them, the curiosity, the topic itself was like how to enter Indian market. So they came, they're not interested to listen to us if we give few tidbits how you can enter India. So India is such a unique country, the outsiders don't find it so easy to enter. So it's a world by itself.
I'll just add to that. We are a very innovative country. You know, Chandrayaan-3 went up and what we did there. But that's not the thing I want to highlight. What I want to highlight is that it was the cheapest shot to the moon ever made by any space agency in the world. And why was that? Why was it cheaper? Because we used a simple concept of gravitation, which is known as slingshot. So while the Americans sent a person to the moon in 3 days or 4 days, we took 40 days. And that was the payoff that we paid in order to make it as cheap as possible, by using this idea of slingshot. No one else had thought of it, but we did it. And we are, in many other ways, also as innovative. If you just look around the way that our people improvise, is just unbelievable. This is part of South Asia. I don't think it's only here, but all over South Asia. And I think that we lead the world in this. Where we don't succeed very well is that we then don't follow up with more of this stuff, and we don't praise you didn't know that this was the cheapest shot to the moon. And the technology it's not being broadcast. It should be. People should understand this is what's happening.
So what do you think is next in education? What do you think is going to be the next big thing? If 30 years ago, holistic education, Oak Ridge was the next big thing, what's the next big thing?
I think that the next big thing is that we should do away with schools.
I'm sure all the builders here will be very excited with this idea.
You know, this business of keeping kids locked up in a classroom, 4 walls, 5 hours a day, continuously, day after day. I mean, in this day and age, you don't need to do that. You've got so much resource at your disposal. You don't need to do that. Also, children know a lot more than you think. And when they're in class 8, they're already thinking of the ways they're going to do things. And you should take them on and give them the opportunity. So I do believe that another 40, 50 years, we will be having a much more flexible school system.
So if anyone's looking to put money into schools without walls, you heard it here first. NP, what do you think Shomie's greatest legacy will be? How does that live on in your work?
The way he gambles with people. So you said the courage. It is much more than that. At least I know the journey, how it started with me and Raz. That itself was a gamble. And together we were gambling with you, Rohit, and many of. So, but the important thing is believing in people's ability. Even much before they themselves see in themselves. That is something, it is not easy. Institution building is all about nurturing people. And how do you do that? Only when you see potential in them. And when do you see? Not when they are too old, when they are very young. That's what we all need to be. If I learned something from Shomie, this is, I think, as an institution builder, this stands on top.
Thank you. Mr. Das, final question. Imagine a young physics teacher just out of university writes to you on advice on when he's thinking about, or she's thinking about becoming a teacher. What advice would you give him or her starting out now?
I don't know. These things happen inside you, you know. You don't learn from other people as much as you learn from what you believe in. I think that a young physics teacher, if he is really taking on the job of teaching physics, must understand that physics is no longer just a subject in that sense. It transcends many other subjects. If you look at gene technology, it's based on physics. Or any other technology today, it's all based on physics. So teaching of physics has got to change a little bit from what it is today. And I think that we continue to teach 19th century, 20th century physics when we should be teaching a different form of physics, not necessarily what we were teaching in the 20th century. And I think maybe it's very difficult for you to understand what that means. Very difficult for me to understand what that means. But unless you begin to adapt to what's happening in the world, you're not going to give the children the input they require.
Thank you. And finally, I think, NP, I think we need that second and third and fourth volume because I don't know about anybody else, but I have thoroughly enjoyed being back on this stage. Feels like Founders Day all over again. Yeah. And we should do this more often because everyone here is genuinely like family. So thank you.
I want to tell you that my real belief is that a brick and mortar school like this is too expensive a way to teach children. You've got to do away with all this rubbish. I mean, we are enjoying it, but there's not a kid here, not a kid in sight. Because how many of them ever use it? This hall lies empty throughout the day. The principal sitting here, she can tell me. So I really think that time has now come to have a different way of doing school. This school would cost 120, 130 crores to build today. And that's simply a waste of money.
Shomie, today 1 acre of land costs that much. So it is close to anywhere 7, 8.
We have to think of different models, you know. This is just not on. And in this whole space, we will have 3,000 kids. There are billions, I mean, there are at least 20 million kids who have to go to school. So this won't do anymore, you know.
So how would one build that access to opportunity, to learning?
Well, the main thing is that you got to allow the kind of things that is happening in the corporate world. They have WeWork offices where different people come at different times and use the same space. And you got to do that. This is complete waste of money.
That's the third time he said it this evening.
Yeah, so as I just spoke, writing a book is more difficult than the journey itself. I think I never dared to do that. So you yourself being author, you know.
The last book came out in 2011 and that was it. So, yeah, I understand that better than most. But thank you for bringing this to life, for allowing us a glimpse into this absolutely amazing person's life and into this absolutely amazing journey. Thank you all so much for being part of this. We really thank you for being here. And thank you, Deepika, for your hospitality. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Arjun.